Hey y'all, I'm Dan Hamilton, host of the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, the Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and the Texas Veterans Land Board. For more resources and benefits information on what the VLB can provide to veterans here in the state of Texas, check out vlb.texas.gov. I'm excited to jump into a conversation with Chris Hale. He is a Navy veteran as well as the CEO of Neptune Companies, and he is joining us all the way from Pittsburgh. Chris, thank you for coming on the show with us today. I'm excited to really kind of jump into entrepreneurship, the veteran advocacy that you have done since your time in the military. Before we do that, can you give our audience a background on your military service?
Yeah, Dan, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on and to be able to tell the story of Neptune Companies and Victory. I went to the Naval Academy from Pittsburgh originally, graduated high school in '87, was part of the Naval Academy class of '91, and I went into the P3 community after that into naval aviation. I was a Navy flight officer on a P3 Orion, and so we kind of a submarine hunting aircraft. And then my last 2.5 years in the Navy was spent doing officer recruiting here in Pittsburgh. All told, I spent about 9 years on active duty.
So over your left shoulder, I think from where the audience is looking, where I am looking, there's a big sign behind you that says GI Jobs. Can you tell us about GI Jobs? You were the original, if I'm correct, the original co-founder as well as CEO.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so that is a sign of sorts. It's actually an authentic NASCAR hood. And one of our partners, one of our companies that we partnered with, Farmers Insurance, had a NASCAR car back. I think this was probably about they may still, but this was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And as part of their July 4th race in Daytona, they asked if we would like to have GI Jobs be the on the hood of the car. And of course, we said, well, absolutely, that would be.
Yeah, hell yeah.
So that actually is it's an exact replica that we purchased of that actual NASCAR hood that was the Farmers Insurance. So it was pretty cool. But no, GI Jobs. Listen, GI Jobs is a brand that we. It was the first brand within Victory. So just as a background, Neptune Companies is the parent company with 2 wholly owned subsidiaries. The primary operating company is Victory, which most people know us of our 2 brands, GI Jobs and Military Spouse, and also, I guess, Military Friendly. So GI Jobs was really created around, a need that myself and my 2 co-founders, Rich McCormick and Scott Shaw, when we left the service, we just saw that there was a real dearth of resources used to assist somebody in transitioning out of the military. And so we created this media brand, which took the form of a print magazine and an online presence called GI Jobs.
Have you always had the entrepreneurial spirit? When you got out of the military, I think that obviously resources and the support systems, not just from maybe a federal benefits or a state benefits side, but the hiring process for veterans, the cultural transition, especially after many veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, was much different. Can you talk about some of the things that you saw and why you wanted to go about solving them?
So really great point on the distinction between what post 9/11 veterans are seeing now. So when we started the company, it was actually in the midst of when 9/11 was occurring. And really in the last 10 or 15 years, there has been a great fervor and appreciation for military service, and corporate America and higher education has really reached out and embraced veterans as employees and as students, but it certainly was not always that way. I think the Vietnam vets would see a very, very different experience when they came back. I'm not old enough to remember that, and neither are you, but they certainly saw a very different climate. My generation, which left the military just before 9/11 happened, I would classify it as indifference. It wasn't anti-military, but it certainly wasn't embracing of military. It was sort of like, yeah, you served, okay, but I'm not sure how your skills translate. And, sort of we'll give you sort of this entry-level position, and let's see what you can do.
Can I pause you real quick?
Yeah.
What was the career or the idea of a career that you had then after the military? Were you trying to go into a corporate job or into a certain industry before you started to build Victory?
So I went to business school my last 2.5 years in the Navy. When I was still on active duty, I went to business school, and I knew I wanted to kind of run my own. I wanted to start my own business. We had looked at a few business plans and a few business ideas around that, and we saw some opportunity there. When we started the business, we didn't have, again, 9/11 was happening, and we were building a business which was based off of the revenue stream being advertising from companies that wanted to recruit people. Well, that wasn't such a great, that wasn't the ideal time to do that. And so I went out and I got a job with Procter & Gamble, great company, and did that for a couple of years, and it provided enough income to the point where we could get the business, GI Jobs up and running.
What were some of the initial hurdles or friction points for veterans getting into corporate jobs, whether that is from the veteran side or whether that's from the hiring side, that you guys were looking to kind of to change, to alter, to massage, and to make better?
Yeah, so on the veteran side, it was really around helping them feel comfortable that their skills ultimately would translate, and giving them the confidence to go out and, find that civilian job. There are certainly what we call these soft landing jobs. So if I was a air traffic controller in the military, then I'm going to become an air traffic controller on the outside. But we encourage veterans to really expand their options. I like to say that, my military field was chosen for me when I was very young. That may or may not be what I want to do 5 or 10 or 25 years later when I leave the service. And so open up your horizons and look at different things you can do. On the employer side, we very much saw the need to create demand for recruiting veterans. And so one of the ways that we did that was we put a scoreboard on the field where I believe that there was a recreational activity going on. There were probably, Dan, I don't know, maybe a dozen companies in the Fortune 1000 that had any semblance of a military recruiting program at the time. And so we put a moniker out there, asked for companies to complete a survey, and we put out an initial list of the top 10 most military-friendly employers based on survey results. And it grew from there, right? Because there were companies on there, other companies wanted to be a part of it, and basically everybody stepped up their game. So the biggest thing there was really kind of creating demand for it. And then it was about, okay, let's figure out better how we can translate military skills into civilian skills.
So fast forward to March of 2020. As you said earlier in the conversation, you're the CEO of Neptune Companies. You have run and co-founded other companies. So now you have maybe a macro perspective of advertising, of corporate culture, of running a business. And then all of a sudden this thing called COVID-19 starts to pop up, and we go, maybe this will be a little deal. Okay, it's probably going to be here. And then all of a sudden everyone's working from home. And, the economy changes, the dynamic of work on an everyday basis has changed. Can you tell me how you have maybe adapted in this environment, and what you have learned about maybe your leadership skills or the way that you've been able to reach out to your staff, and kind of the importance, I guess, of adapting in an extremely kind of unpredictable environment? I'm interested to know, what the leadership skills have been, and what the characteristics that you have learned about business through this time are.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, our initial response, I think, was like everybody else, like, holy cow, there's this unknown thing. What's going to happen? We were in the fortunate position that our company, there's really no physicality to our business that's required. As a marketing company, pretty much everything that we can do can be done remotely. And we had already had it probably on average about 1 day per week for our employees that was working remotely. So I would say from an operational perspective, it was, relatively seamless for us, but there was definitely, companies weren't hiring as much, unemployment was skyrocketing. And again, here we go again, right? A company that derives a significant portion of its revenue from recruitment advertising. I think there were some folks in our company who were, hey, listen, how's this all going to shake out for us, right? And I was just pleased as can be with the way that our folks responded. And, I encouraged us to not only respond and survive, but look for ways to thrive. I've always, kind of been led to believe that when there is a significant crisis or a challenge, that the majority of people are going to go a certain way and behave in a certain manner. And that's inevitably going to create opportunities in that. And so, I challenged our company to kind of look for ways that we can create opportunities out of this challenge. And they responded. Our folks responded marvelously. And we've embarked upon a couple of different opportunities that we, that we identified about 4 or 5 months ago that are really kind of paying dividends right now.
How have you personally adapted to the work from home environment? I know I usually break up the camp into, if you're an introvert, kind of like myself, you feel okay about things. You can kind of be comfortable at home and not in the office every day. But the extroverts who want to be in the office, they want to be around people, they want to socialize. I think it's a little bit more difficult for them. But how have you found kind of the personal and professional balance to be?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I have a house full of people at home. I've got 3 kids at home and my wife, and so I mean, I was able to kind of carve out a place where I could have some quiet and so forth. But for me, I was always around them when I was working remotely. But I was never really a person who enjoyed working remotely. We did have some of that going on within our company, but I was never a real big believer in, remote work to a large degree. But I was made a believer. And I certainly think there is a lot of value in coming together physically. I think there's, the collaboration that naturally happens. And a lot of that is unintended. It's conversations that just erupt between people. And all of a sudden you've got some ideas that come out of that. Certainly relationship building and kind of the continuance of the culture. Those are things that I think really are best done in a physical environment. But there is an awful lot of sort of heads down time, lack of interruptions, being able to really, really focus on your work without having sort of flybys happening. That is really best done remotely. So, I think that a good blend is probably when we get a vaccine and when this whole thing shakes out and it's all, history. I think we'll have a good blend, but I think we'll probably have probably a majority of our people will be working more remotely than they will in an office environment.
What drew you to the marketing and advertising space?
Really it was wanting to create a market. I mean, one of the things that's driven me in life and in business has been finding something that you believe in, that you're passionate about, and then building upon that. And so one of the things that I was very passionate about when I left the service was, again, kind of looking around and saying, man, I feel like I've had some really great experiences. I feel like I've been very well trained. I've got a great educational background. And by the way, all of the people that I served with have all those same attributes. And what we saw on the other side was, this indifference and lack of understanding in the private sector. And so what that drove me really was to kind of create opportunity in the private sector for veterans and make that a little more seamless, create demand for that. And that's just a real big part of what drove me. But I think regardless of what you do, right. And I tell this to my kids all the time. I mean, you've got to find out what you love to do. What is your why, right? What is your big idea? What's the thing that really, really drives you and gets you excited about going to work every day? And that's the thing that you got to do for the rest of your life, because if you do, you'll be successful doing it, because the passion is so important because that's what provides the energy and the motor, right, to get better and succeed.
So was there a business or an idea or maybe a book that you have read that kind of lit that fire in you? Or, I always think that people have somewhat of a blueprint. They've seen other people do things, or the characteristics, the way that they carry themselves, that maybe started your interest in entrepreneurship, started your interest in business, or even things like joining the military. Can you talk about maybe some business influences that you've had in your life that have kind of propelled you forward?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a very big believer in the transformative power of business. I am very much, a believer in the patriotism in America and free enterprise and capitalism. And I believe that those things are necessary to create, the incentives and the passions and the drives to create innovation and change and things like that, and to create, better products and services ultimately. And I believe that there is no more powerful thing than American businesses to be able to do that. So, I think that fundamentally, that's one of the things I believe in. In terms of I think I've always had a passion for it. I think a lot of people do. But I've always had a passion for it. I remember being a kid, probably 2 or 3 years old, and discovering that if you put water in a thimble, right, back when mom actually had sewing machines and stuff, my mom had one. I don't know anyone who does anymore, but if you put water in a thimble and you turn it upside down, the water stays there. And I was fascinated by this at age 2 or 3. And I said, okay, so I'll bet if I'm fascinated by that, I can walk around my neighborhood and get other people to pay me a nickel to see that same fascination in their face. And I did. And it started there and moved on to a couple of other things. And I was just really just kind of intrigued by this, things, these entrepreneurial things. And it just kind of grew from there, having my own paper route and things like that. And I think, a lot of people have that. A lot of people want that. Timing is a real big part of that too, right? And to really kind of jump off the cliff with that, it's got to be the right time in your life. You got to have the financial security, and there's a real fine line between when that can happen, when you're sort of old enough, young enough to still have the passion, but not too old that you don't have all these responsibilities, right, of other people, where you're not willing to maybe take on some of that financial risk. And I think I was just fortunate. And so, so were my co-founders, that we were all at a point in our lives when we could make that move.
Can I ask you, if you were getting out of the military now and you had just finished up business school, what kind of business would you start? Would you go into advertising, or would you consider, everybody, obviously the rage now is tech, and everyone wants to be a TikTok star and, social media and whatever. What opportunities do you see for maybe young entrepreneurs or young veterans?
Yeah. So I have a high school senior who's going to be attending Carnegie Mellon University.
Awesome.
And going to their business school in the fall. And
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
it's a huge. I bet that's the. It's always good to be able to celebrate things in the middle of kind of unpredictable circumstances. To be able to, chalk up some W's and say, "Hey, we did it. Let's keep going." That must feel really good for you.
Yeah, no, for sure. And his freshman year is going to be a little bit different than most freshman years. I think the first semester is going to be spent in his bedroom at home, and he won't make it on campus until the second semester because they're doing this 50% coverage thing. But I told him he's pursuing that, and in part because it has a good technology. There's a lot of technology coming out of that school. So, I hate to use the cliche, but really to me, the future is all about, innovation and technology, and any sort of a business or an industry that is going to be automating routine processes or is going to be using big data and big technology. I think that's certainly where the future is. When you hear some of these cliches, like 50% of the jobs won't exist in 5 years, there's probably, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but man, there's just so much that's changing. So I think if you go into a field today, there's a very high likelihood that in 5 or 10 years, when you're kind of done with college and getting into your career, that occupation will change, right? And so I think that if you understand technology and you understand, how it can be transformative and change, and in some kind of a field that is automating routine processes, I think you can't go wrong there.
So you spoke earlier kind of about the passion that you need to have to be able to just get up in the morning and want to pursue something to build a business. Is there something about, or maybe in more recent times, is there something today that still drives you, that still gets you up in the morning, that keeps you passionate? Because maybe from an outsider's perspective, they go, man, he's already founded multiple business. You're obviously a veterans advocate, and you've accomplished a lot of great things after your military service. So what kind of keeps that fire burning for you?
Yeah. So, for us, the transformation has really been around in the last 20 years, the way that we connect veterans with civilian employers and civilian educators has changed a lot, right? So it's really through advertising and marketing, and that is constantly changing. And so being at the leading edge of that is important. It's important to stay ahead of it. And so I think the ways that we are able to connect veterans to civilian opportunity, or to markets, right? Any two markets, they've changed dramatically, and we can do those now in such a highly measurable way and a much more efficient way. So we're able to go to our clients now and, be very, very detailed about what their expectations are, how we can deliver on those expectations, and then, give them feedback on how well we're performing in delivering that message to them. And so, I think that's the thing that's super exciting. It's like almost every day, right, there's new technologies and new things that we can use to connect the two markets.
I'm going to ask you one more question here, or just a couple more questions before we have to close it out. But you mentioned earlier that when you were in business school, you had a couple co-founders, or you had a couple guys who are around you to build your business. Can you talk about maybe what they brought to the table, in the importance of selecting great people to have around you to start a business? Or I guess, having good people around you is not just a great business practice, it's also a great life practice.
Yeah, no, it's the team, and having complementary skills on the team is really important. So, I would say that, Rich, two co-founders, right? Rich brought a lot of organizational skills, and really kind of was able to develop the planning around executing on a lot of the ideas, which was really important. I kind of thought about, had a lot of ideas on how we can grow and different things, but he really kind of was able to take those and break those down into smaller pieces to be able to execute on that. And so I think that's a skill that he brought. And Scott Shaw and I worked together in Navy recruiting, and he was far and away the best salesperson, the best recruiter, right, and the best salesperson that I knew there. And so when we left and we formed the company, we said, wow, we need a superstar salesperson, and Scotty was far and away our number one choice there. So, and we were fortunate enough, he wanted to come over and make the jump. He had already gotten out of the Navy and was working for a company for a couple of years, but we were fortunate we were able to attract him. He made the jump. So he was really, really the third of three co-founders.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the program today and telling us about business and how it's been over the last 10 or 15 years for you, as well as how it's been adapting to kind of a different work from home environment, and appreciate all your words of insight and your experience. But before we let you go, is there maybe a last word or something that we didn't get to touch on today that you would like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I would just say, so our business is about helping transitioning veterans. And I would say one of the things that I see transitioning veterans doing probably all too often is holding on to the past and comparing the private sector to what they had in the military, right? And listen, when you're in the military, most of us are very young when we're in. We're doing tip of the spear stuff. The people that we work with are people that become literally our family, because you spend like 24/7, 365 with those people. And so it's very much a family, all in, work hard, play hard kind of an atmosphere. And when you get out, the culture is very different. Civilians go to work and hang out with their families after work, and they do that on the weekends too, right? And so I think veterans feel this real lack of like esprit de corps and camaraderie, and really want to replace that in the service. And I would just say, it's different, but it's different in a good way. And I would encourage veterans to not spend a great deal of time, comparing what the private sector is to what they had in the military, but embrace that, right? Embrace the change, embrace the next chapter in your life. It is going to be different, but it's going to be different in a good way. And I guess that's the piece of advice I would leave with veterans who are in the process of transitioning.
That's a great place to leave it at. Chris Hale is the Chief Executive Officer of Neptune Companies, as well as a Navy veteran. Chris, thank you for being on the program with us today and sharing a lot of great insights about life, business, and veteran entrepreneurship.
Dan, I enjoyed it. Thank you for what you do. Thanks for getting the message out.
Absolutely. On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush and the Texas Veterans Land Board, my name is Dan Hamilton. We will see you back here next Monday. Thank you for joining.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior Podcast.